Hey, today I want to talk about defunding the police. So, what does defunding actually mean? Let's get that definition out the way. So, defunding means to take funds away. Just like funding means to give funds to, defunding means take funds away. Now, two parts of this conversation I want to have. I want to talk about the actual defunding part of the police department, but I also want to get into the second layer of defunding, which is the policies and procedures, because we also need to we need to look into how our police are policing our communities and what we can do better with our police department and how can they police us better. So how did defunding come about? Well, defunding came about right after George Floyd's death. Well, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, all that kind of mashed into one. But the George Floyd death set off so many bells around this country. There was a big uprising around his death because this country has watched for so long so many African Americans lose their lives senselessly, unarmed to police officers. And really, just as of recent, these police officers are now just starting to be prosecuted. And also, let me address something real quick in this video. People ask, well, why are we so mad when police officers kill us, but we don't say nothing about what happens in our community as far as the black on black crime? You have to understand something. When black people kill black people, typically there's a justice that is served. Black people go to jail when they kill each other, right? Usually, and they usually get a lot of time, sometimes life sentences that are usually handed down. But when police kill us, there is no justice in the community for these police officers. And when now that they are being charged, you see the slaps on the wrist they're given, 5 years, 7 years, and they don't even do all their time. Then on top of that, they end up leaving jail with the pensions if they're a tenured police officer. So it should be, it's not us protesting out in the streets going crazy because against police departments, it's the system. The police departments are part of a system that is supposed to protect us. And when the system that's supposed to protect us is not protecting us, and when they're doing wrong to us and they're getting away with it, that's the problem. The system comes down heavy on us when we do the crime, but when the system actually messes up, there's no justice being served. So let's address that. So back to the defunding part. So in most major cities around the country, you talk about LA to New York to Chicago, most of these police departments have major budgets. Most of these budgets are topping over $1 billion. I know for a fact the state of New York budget hits over $1 billion. I'm not sure if LA and Chicago, but I know New York hits over $1 billion. Now, that's a lot of money to a police department, in which you'll think maybe rightfully so, these are major cities, big cities. But then if you look at each of these cities, Chicago, LA, and New York, in their urban areas where black people are, there's a lot of poverty-ridden areas in these communities. No funds in these actual communities. So that's why defunding the police was such a great idea, because you want to take some of these funds away from these police departments and put it back into these communities that need it. And maybe if you just did that, maybe you wouldn't need as many police officers as you think you need. Because for years we have watched this country say we need more police officers to stop the crime. Well, from my experience and things that I've watched, police usually show up after the crime is committed. I've never seen a police officer or even heard a police officer stepping in and stopping someone from pulling the trigger and killing someone. They usually show up after that crime has already been committed. So more police don't mean less crime. More police riding around on streets means less crime. Folks gonna do crime, period. And a lot of the time, these folks that live in impoverished areas, poverty breeds crime, drugs, all those things. Because at that point in these impoverished areas, it's not about what's doing right anymore. It's about survival. And survival is not about what's right. Survival is about trying to live and survive. So, in defund the police, here in the city that I'm working in, I know for a fact that they spend money on some things that most people won't agree with. And it showed, there was a study out of Austin that showed majority of people wanted to actually defund the police. Now, what did this money actually go to in the communities that we wanted to go to? You can talk about after-school programs, YMCAs, better education buildings for our students, more affordable housing, building more resources as far as, maybe grocery stores in these communities, because these are the things that these communities lack. So that's just to name a few. So let's say we take 100 million out of these budgets. Now, some of the things that I noticed that are within police budgets, police year after year spend money stocking live ammunition, which means these police departments across the country have warehouses of ammunition, guns, bullets, whatever, year after year. Now you ask, what do they need it for? How often are police actually getting into gun shootouts or big old straight riots of people just shooting at them? It's not often, and it shows. The study shows here in the city I'm in that police respond to less than 10% of violent crimes. So most of the time they spend their time either at the homeless shelter here or at a Walmart. And then on the other hand, that they also spend a lot of their time responding to mental health calls. Well, police officers tell you themselves that they are not trained or equipped to handle mental health calls. So like Atiana Jefferson in Fort Worth, her neighbor called for a wellness checkup because her front door was open about 2 or 3 in the morning, something like that. Well, police responded, walked past her open front door and walked to her backyard and shot this girl through her window. That wasn't necessary for a wellness check. So you have to look into the policies and procedures of these police departments on how they're policing certain communities. Because if it's just a wellness check, the neighbor could have probably possibly walked across the street and knocked on the door and see if everything was okay. So police officers are just not equipped to just handle certain things like that. But a lot of times, mental health calls. Police department, when they show up, they're arresting somebody who's having a mental breakdown or something real bad happening. It goes as far as someone being killed on a mental health breakdown. So that's going into the policies and procedures part of the police departments. Now, in defund the police, I know in some cities they are actually dismantling their police department. I think in Minneapolis, Minnesota, they're actually breaking their police department's infrastructure down totally, because in that city it was a high number of like injustices done by the police department in the African American community. So they said, you know what, let's start all over from scratch and let's break this totally down. But in most cities, they're not asking to dismantle the entire police department. They're just asking to take some funds away. Let's look at some policies and procedures, and let's try to move forward. I know Austin just released its budget for next year, 2020 to 21 budget. And one of the things they wanted to do was freeze the training academy and freeze all hiring of new officers. And I thought it was a great idea because, and looking at the policies and procedures, let's retrain them, the new officers that come in, and let's stop hiring officers like we once were in the past, because more officers just don't equal to less crime. We should be more in the business of investing into people than to institutions. And that's one of the problems that this country always has, investing into institutions instead of people. Just like this pandemic that we're going through right now. They rather put more money into these big institutions, these big companies, than to put money back into our hands. Because if you know anything about economics, this country, this economy does not move until people are buying. People have to buy for this economy to move. And if people are not buying, then why are you putting more money into these institutions to hold them up? And these institutions, you talk about billion-dollar companies, these companies should be fine, especially after Trump gave his tax breaks to them. They should be fine, right? But no, they showed what they did with their money. They wanted to make themselves rich, but that's besides the point. But people may ask, well, what if putting money back into the community, it doesn't work? Well, we've tried putting more police officers for years and years, for decades on the streets, and that didn't work. So let's try another way. I'm all for putting money back into communities to make life better for most people in the inner city, then put more money back into institutions that have no oversight on how they spend their dollars. And the results are not being produced. It continues to, time after time, these cases of people are being killed, mental breakdowns are being handled wrong. So let's change the way we police totally up, because the infrastructure or how policing was built was wrong from the get-go. So let's stop while we're ahead and let's move to let's try something different. So tell me what y'all think about this video, but that's defund the police. That's from the knowledge I know and what I've been studying. So let me know what you think about this video. Give me a thumbs up if you like it. Appreciate it.